it looks like a postcard. You know, it's got the white house and the tower and the white shed and the red shed and the white picket fence in the front yard. And it is a place that invites you to imagine what it would be like if you had lived there in the past. There's definitely a big nostalgic kick that people get from that.
Welcome to Seacoast Stories, a podcast about the people, businesses, and newsmakers that make the Seacoast an American hidden gem. I'm Trey Farkas, and on today's episode, my talk with the Nubble Lighthouse keeper and everything you've ever wanted to know about the Seacoast's most iconic landmark. Today's story starts on November 30th, 1842. It's Thanksgiving night, and the Isidore is sailing near Bald Head Cliffs in Cape Neddick, Maine. On board the cargo ship are 16 young men, most of whom hail from Kennebunk. Carrying loads of lumber, the newly constructed ship is on her maiden voyage, headed south toward New Orleans, and then eventually to France. The calendar hasn't yet turned to winter, but an unexpected snowstorm has taken the crew by surprise. High wind speeds lead the Isidore's captain, Leander Foss, to lose control of the ship and stray off course. The waves toss the ship toward Avery Cove, an underwater ledge a short distance from Cape Neddick Island. And then, suddenly, the ship crashes into the rocks, reducing the Isidore to pieces on impact. All 16 passengers would die in the shipwreck, the tragedy that, unfortunately, was needed to force the hand of the U.S. government. In 1837, 5 years before the fatal wreck of the Isidore, a proposal to build a lighthouse along the southern coast of Maine was put forward. Despite the area's reputation as a global commercial hub at that time, the government, claiming Maine already had too many lighthouses, shot the proposal down. But after the Isidore tragically crashed 5 years later, the calls to build a Cape Neddick lighthouse began again. Facing mounting public pressure, the government finally agreed to build the lighthouse. But it didn't happen quickly, because nothing ever does. And then finally, 37 years following the crash, the Cape Neddick lighthouse turned on its lights for the first time. Fast forward to today, and this lighthouse, lovingly known as the Nubble, is the Seacoast's most iconic landmark, a reminder of Maine's importance to the early American economy, and a callback to what lighthouses used to represent. Today, approximately 1 million people from around the world come visit the Nubble Lighthouse every summer. But none of them can look, they can only touch. In fact, only one person gets to routinely touch the lighthouse, and that's today's guest on the show, Nubble Lighthouse keeper Matt Rosenberg, who is also an English teacher at York High School. Matt has had the gig for 13 years, and he swears it's the best job he's ever had. And in 2024, the job is vastly different than what it was in 1879. So to start today's show, we begin with the basics. Matt, can you tell me what exactly the purpose of a lighthouse is?
The purpose of a lighthouse has changed a lot throughout the history of lighthouses. Before electricity and modern navigation, a lighthouse was essential for finding where you're going or avoiding hazards. Ships would come across the Atlantic, and the first thing they would see if they came in at night was the light of a lighthouse beacon. So it really became like a bridge for commerce to Europe and other parts of the world long ago. I'd say the modern context for lighthouses would be that, they're historic places that remind us of our history and how we built this country. And then there are also places for gathering for people, their families. They make memories there. People get engaged and married. So lighthouses have had a pretty broad range of purposes. And right now, I feel like it's mostly a nostalgic purpose. We're just working to keep them beautiful. Navigationally, they still have navigational aids, and the Coast Guard maintains those, but they're less essential in an electronic world where every boat can have a GPS on it.
Now, how did you come to be the keeper for the Nubble Lighthouse?
Well, I would say like all things Nubble Lighthouse, it's not a very interesting story that happens in a really interesting place. It was advertised in the newspaper, which I don't think anybody gets a job like that anymore. And then also they put it out to our school email server because the man who had done it before had been a teacher in another school district. And it's really a spring, summer, fall job with almost nothing to do in the wintertime. And so in order to prevent losing the person who was doing that job, they felt like a teacher's schedule was the best possible one. But I said, my wife actually found me the ad in the newspaper and she said, you should apply for this. And I said, no, I'm not going to get this job. I'm like, almost 40 years old. I'm probably too old for it. And I applied and over 60 people applied for that job. And by some miracle, I ended up being the guy.
What qualifications did you have to be the Nubble Lighthouse keeper?
I have a pretty weird and long resume. For 10 years, I was a whitewater raft guide in the summertime. I've worked for plumbers and landscapers and occasionally carpenters. So I have like a diverse set of skills that kind of you can bring all those to bear on a job like being the lighthouse keeper.
Okay, so what exactly does the lighthouse keeper do?
So my job has changed recently. I used to take care of the park that was next to the lighthouse and the lighthouse itself. Now I only take care of the lighthouse, which is a great change for me. And, I do kind of light maintenance at the lighthouse, like the odd jobs, replacing the parts that are broken, touching up the paint and making sure that everything works. I also mow the lawn, which is 1 day a week. It's a full day of mowing. It takes about 6.5, 7 hours.
Push riding?
Push. It's 22-inch push mower. It's self-propelled, but the ground is really uneven and the lawn is steep. So a riding lawnmower would be terrifying.
Yeah.
And then I also coordinate with all the people who do the things that I don't do, like when we paint the whole lighthouse or, when we have an electrician over and that kind of stuff. That's just a little bit beyond my skill level.
And to get to the lighthouse, because you cannot walk to the lighthouse. You can't just be a public person just visiting and walk up to the lighthouse. You have to take a boat to get there, right? So all these workers have to take a boat to get there.
Yes. It's on an island. It's a couple 100 feet from shore. You can view it from the park, but there's water between you and the lighthouse. And I have a little 10-foot rowboat that I can bring one person at a time across. We have a construction company that I've been working with for years. They bring their own craft, but beyond that, I bring everybody.
So what's your schedule like?
My schedule is driven by the demand of the lighthouse. So I'm usually working 2 or 3 days a week right now. And, if the lawn needs to be mowed, I get out there when it's not raining. If I need an electrician there, I work around his schedule. So it changes every single week, but usually it's like 2 or 3 days. Usually good planning can prevent me from having to go out unexpectedly, but I have been out there at 11:30 at night when a big storm kicks up and I realize that I need to pull the little boat that I go across in higher. And so I drive down from Wells where I live and get out there in the rain and make sure everything's safe.
So does someone say, hey, Matt, we need you there right now? Or it's kind of your call, your intuition?
It's both, so the management of York Parks and Rec might do that. But a lot of time I'm pretty self-directed. I've been doing it for a long time. It's a job that really takes 4 or 5 years to learn because there's stuff that only happens every 4 or 5 years. So usually I'm the person who thinks of it before anybody else.
Okay. So doing it for 13 years and the 4 or 5 years learning on the job, what were some of the biggest challenges that you faced early on?
I think some of the biggest challenges were figuring out what actually had to be done, because when I was hired, I was given a job description that looked pretty big, but the job was so much bigger. It's more than just mowing the lawn and fixing things sometimes. So over the years, I've just been kind of realizing like what has to be done for the lighthouse. And like sometimes it's just public relations and anticipating like what won't get a negative reaction like from the public, because with social media, you get a lot of those. So
really, what kind of negative reactions do you get for the Nubble Lighthouse?
Like a classic example would be that we had a webcam system, but we lose power pretty frequently because we're at the end of a run. And, like people weren't very kind when the webcams went down. And then, our entire system kind of aged into obsolescence a couple of years ago. And we're working on trying to get it back. But, just little things like that can set people off and you get a strong negative reaction sometimes from the public.
What's the harshest thing someone ever said to you?
Oh, I don't know if anybody ever really directs it at me. It's more like the Parks Department in general. But I don't know. I kind of don't really remember that stuff because I let it slide off and leave it in the past.
Good. You have thick skin. We like that from our lighthouse keepers.
Yeah. I probably learned that at school.
So there was a webcam that was just trained on the lighthouse 24/7.
Yeah,
and people watched that.
Yeah, we had a webcam system with 3 cameras that could support like 500,000 viewers, and we get viewers from all over the world. And we are actually, we're trying to figure out how to get that back, but it's a complicated and expensive process to keep anything electronic out in that environment.
Why?
The weather is really tough on things. The air has salt in it constantly. I have an old truck, but it looks even older than it is because it's parked there so often that like the environment just eats it alive,
Oh, wow. What's the most danger you've ever been in?
I would say probably the most dangerous situations I've been in have been when I've been on the island, doing work, and then the weather changes rapidly, and then you're faced with the decision of going back before it gets worse, or kind of waiting it out and seeing how long it's going to be. But so crossing that little stretch of water with the boat can be a huge challenge. Generally speaking, if I can handle waves of 2 feet in that little boat, it's really small. And, I can kick up and it can be, 3 to 4 feet pretty rapidly, especially if we have a intense storm come through. So, I always have to keep an eye on that. And occasionally I've been caught on the wrong side. I think I've dumped the boat twice in the time that I've been there. But, so I'd say that's usually the most dangerous situation that you can find yourself in is driven by the ocean itself.
Given the always on nature of the job, some of the dangers of the job, the social media backlash that you get. Have you ever considered not coming back year after year? I mean, you've been at it 13 years. Have you ever just been like, I'm over this?
Nah, it's the best job I've ever had. So
really?
I've had a lot of jobs, and I don't know. It's really wonderful to be mostly self-directed and be in charge of caring for something that is so important. Like the importance of that, I feel that, and I feel like I'm part of a long line of people. It was built in 1879, and I believe it's had over 30 keepers in that time. And you work on stuff, and every now and then I'm working on fixing something or replacing something. I'm like, there's probably been many other men who have done exactly this at a different time. And that kind of brings it all together for me.
Are there any historic moments kind of between 1879 and now? Historic visitors to the Nubble Lighthouse, events, ceremonies, weddings, things of that nature.
There have been there are a lot of weddings. I don't know if there are any of historical significance, but you think of like a couple of interesting anecdotes related to the lighthouse and side stories. But, for years, there was a giant cat that lived out there. It was one lighthouse keeper's cat. And when he left, he was like, this was my cat, but now it belongs to the lighthouse. And he left it to the next keeper. And the cat was famous for swimming to the mainland because it had caught all the mice on the island. And it would swim to the mainland sometime during the day. And people would see it swimming in the water in the ocean. And then it would hunt for a while. And then it would, before dark, get back in the water and swim back to the lighthouse. Yeah, cats don't really do that.
I've never seen a cat swim before. I now have to go watch a cat swimming video.
Yeah, and it was a big cat. The second lighthouse keeper that owned it This is long ago. He was a tall guy, and you can actually, if you Google it, you can find a photo of him sitting with the cat in his lap, and the cat goes from his lap to his chin. So it was a big cat.
What's the cat's name?
Mr. T.
Mr. T.
Mr. T. So, and then also like there was a boy in the 60s who was famous for, there's a electronic, at that time it wasn't electronic, but it was a hand operated cable car that was used for supplies. And in the 60s, his father used to send him back and forth to catch the bus in that little cable car. And he would draw like a crowd. People would show up just to watch it. So,
okay.
Yeah.
I'm still stuck on this cat. How much water is there separating the lighthouse from the park? How far did this cat swim?
It's probably 150 feet.
Okay.
Of ocean.
Okay.
And it's cold and it gets rough.
Yeah.
That's apparently is a dedicated cat.
Now, if I were so inclined, can I swim to the lighthouse? Is that allowed, or will I get shot down by the rifles on top of the lighthouse?
No, we don't shoot anybody. But yeah, the lighthouse is not open to the public. It's just not a very safe place. When you're standing in the park, if you look at it, it has a nice sloping lawn that is pretty big. That kind of goes down to a mid-sized cliff of about 20 feet. The backside is it's maybe 40 or 50 feet, and then it goes into like a 40-foot cliff.
Okay.
And there's just no way for us to make it safe for the general public. So we've closed the island to all visitors. And historically it has been, for a long time it was a Coast Guard station as well. So it was a military installation, and people were really only allowed to go by invitation.
So was it ever open to visitors?
Not really. Early in its existence, there was a lighthouse keeper who got fired because he was charging, he's taking people across. This is in the late 1800s for a quarter.
It's brilliant.
And his bosses found out about it, and they determined that he was not doing a very good job of taking care of the lighthouse because he was just giving tours all the time.
What are the rules of being the lighthouse keeper? What's the code of conduct that they hand you?
I don't know if I ever got handed a code of conduct, but
it seems like there's a loophole. I feel like you could charge people.
I feel like one of the best things that they ever did for me was to tell me that it wasn't up to me whether or not people went to the lighthouse, because then I didn't have to be the guy who said no. Because people have really compelling stories, about hardship in their life or why the lighthouse is important to them, and the Parks Department is inundated with requests all the time. But deciding who goes is above my pay grade, and I wouldn't have it any other way, because it is hard to be the person who says no to somebody who wants to fulfill a dream. What
are some of the examples of when people say this lighthouse means so much to me? What kind of stories do these people tell?
A lot of times it is because they have had a relative who, always took them to the park. Occasionally there are people who have had some kind of past connection to the lighthouse, like a grandfather or a father who might have like served at Nubble Lighthouse or even briefly. And then there's a lot of, sad stories about people who are not going to be with us much longer, but that's their wish to do it. But unfortunately, if we accommodated all of those things, that would be the only thing I did with my time at the Nubble Lighthouse. So we do get a lot of requests.
And quite a lot of visitors, approximately 500,000 come every summer. Is that correct?
Yeah, when I started 13 years ago, they told me about 500,000 people visited the lighthouse a year. And it used to be that Saturdays were crazy and Sundays were really busy, and then weekdays were pretty quiet. And now every weekday is in the summertime is about like Saturday used to be. And Saturdays and Sundays are on a whole nother level. So I think we have got to be over 1 million visitors a year.
Wow.
By my observation.
And what is it about Nubble Lighthouse specifically that makes it so special? What makes it different than just any other lighthouse that it has all these people coming from all over to see?
I think it's a combination of a few things. One of them is that you can go there and you almost never have anybody obstructing your view. So I'm usually, if you see anybody on the island, it's me. And even at that, like I talk to people when I'm coming back in my little boat who say, I have been coming here for 30 years and I've never seen anybody on that island. So it's just about perfect every time you come to see it. Another reason why people, I think, love it is because it is really quaint. It looks like a postcard. You know, it's got the white house and the tower and the white shed and the red shed and the white picket fence in the front yard. And it is a place that invites you to imagine what it would be like if you had lived there in the past, you know, and there's definitely a big nostalgia kick that people get from that. And then the last thing I think that makes people become obsessed with it is that you actually can't go there. Like you can love it and you can look at it all you want, but you can't touch it. And I think there's a part of human psychology that makes people obsessed with things like that, you know, and I don't think it's not an unhealthy obsession, but I also don't think that's too strong a word. Like I love the lighthouse, but every day I meet people who are way more excited about it than I am.
And that's not common for lighthouses to be that it's so inaccessible.
You know, it's not because it's so close. Like you might be able to look at a lighthouse offshore. Like for example, from York Beach, you could look out at Boone Island and it is 6.5 miles away. It's the tallest lighthouse in New England.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's 137 feet tall, I think.
How tall is Nubble?
Nubble is only a 40-foot tower, and it's 85 feet above the high tide line is the top of it.
Oh, puny.
Yeah, it's not a very big lighthouse, but you know, Boone Island is so far away that you can look at it through binoculars, but it's hard to get connected to it. And then on the other hand, there are lots of other lighthouses that are right on the shore, and you can walk right up to them and touch them. And I mean, people love those lighthouses too, but I feel like it's that we have a lighthouse that's just the right distance. Like you can see it in detail, but you can't actually go there.
So, you know, the age that we're living in, you're a media man, so you're very caught up to speed with all the trends. I'm sure Nubble Lighthouse is not only suited ideally for a postcard, but also for social media. So many tourists, I imagine, are coming with their selfie sticks and doing that thing where they pinch their fingers together so that it looks like they're holding the lighthouse. When you see that, what is your reaction to that?
Well, I tell them don't squish my lighthouse. But really, I kind of love it. Like I love how people interact with the lighthouse. It's so cool, you know, and you know, we live in a tourist area and it's like it comes with its problems, you know, like traffic and people everywhere. And it's hard to go out to dinner and stuff like that. But I have to remind myself that like they're here because they love this place, you know, and there are people that save up all year so they can spend a week where we get to live all the time. And it really kind of validates like the life that you've chosen to live for yourself. And it's worth it to kind of put up with that and to live in a place that's really expensive to live in because you are living someone else's vacation all the time. And with the lighthouse, the attention that it gets is actually the reason why we are so successful with it. Because if people didn't care about it, we would not have the funds necessary to maintain that lighthouse and keep it looking the way it does. You know, all the time people ask me if anybody lives there. And I tell them nobody's lived there since 1987. And they tell me it looks like somebody lives there. Mm. So it's kind of nice.
Okay, couple questions. How does the lighthouse generate revenue?
Well, we're really fortunate. You know, there are over 60 lighthouses in the state of Maine, and only a few of them have a vehicle for creating revenue that is consistent and reliable. And we have a gift shop. And we do really well in our gift shop. We get a lot of visitors every year. We have a really strong volunteer network there as well, like people that give information to the public and people who help out in the gift shop. And so they really help us get the job done efficiently and effectively too. But we're fortunate that, you know, like people come and they stop in our gift shop and they buy a t-shirt and some postcards. And that's how we pay for everything. And Nubble Lighthouse is an incredibly expensive piece of property. You know, if you gave it to me, I couldn't afford to have it, you know, so we're lucky.
Do you happen to know, and if you can't divulge, no problem, how much it costs per year to keep the lighthouse going?
I couldn't say accurately like how much it costs per year, but we've done some external preservation projects in the last 7 or 8 years that have run into the hundreds of thousands of dollars just to keep the lighthouse looking right, and maintaining its structural integrity as well. It's more than just looks; it's also making sure that it is not going to fall down and it's not going to rust to pieces.
Yeah,
and that is so expensive.
Lastly, on this subject, what do you find most fulfilling about this job?
I would say probably this right here, like taking care of a lighthouse and being a part of a tradition is really amazing. And I love that. And I can have that just about any time that I want. But talking to people about it and, sharing history and giving it personality, I think is my favorite part of the job. And, I meet people from all over the world and people who are so excited to come here. There are people who come to Maine because they saw, like somebody told me once that they got a calendar, with Nubble Light as one of the pages. And when they saw that, they knew that they wanted to come there. So I think, getting to talk to people and interact with them and develop relationships, that's the best part about this job.
You say that you've spoken to people from all over the world coming to this little strip of Maine. What are some of the places that, or where are some of the places that people have come from that you've talked to?
Oh, we have lots of European visitors. We get lots of visitors from East Asia and Africa, South America, Central America.
So wild.
Yeah, and everybody comes to the Nubble. The funny thing is that local people don't go to the Nubble that often. Of
course.
Yeah, because it's a tourist destination.
Right.
But I have friends in the area who say, oh yeah, I went to the Nubble because we had people visiting from away and we brought them there and I forgot how nice it is. So I would encourage anybody when things calm down after Labor Day to go tourist around and go to the Nubble and all those places that you never go to because they are kind of amazing.
Yeah, I will go after tourist season because I've made the mistake of crossing into the York-Ogunquit area in the summer and it is absolute madness. Can we talk about in Ogunquit that weird intersection, that 4-way with no signage really of any kind? It's the biggest madhouse I've ever seen. I never want to set foot there ever again.
Yeah, that place is kind of nuts.
Yeah.
I mean, you can work your way around it, but like if you're going to come to that area and you're a local person, like the most important thing you can bring is your patience because it's going to be tried.
It's crazy that you say that people from East Asia come and see the Nubble Lighthouse and come to Maine because I moved here a year ago. I've said on the podcast a few times before that I'm trying to get my friends from Georgia, from New Jersey, from New York City to come visit New Hampshire and Maine. And the reaction I get is, why? Why would I go to New Hampshire or to Maine? So even in the US, some people are starting to catch on to the Seacoast, especially post-pandemic and the people flocking to more secluded life from the busy cities. But the fact that these places are even getting international recognition and are a tourist destination like the Nubble Lighthouse is pretty mind-blowing to me. Because I would think, I've done a lot of traveling abroad and I talk to people who have never been to the US and they want to go to the US. Where do you want to go? No one ever says Maine. No one's ever heard of Maine. I don't even say when they ask where I'm from. I say, I'm from Boston or I'm from New York City, depending on where I am. Because I would think, you want to go to Vegas, you want to go to New York City, you want to go to LA, maybe you want to go to New Orleans. I feel like these are the places that foreigners would want to go, not Maine.
Yeah, I mean, it's, I guess if you hear about it, then you know about it. Or if you've been to the States and, people tell you should go to Maine, maybe you'll go there. But I don't know how they find it. My son goes to Boston College. And when he showed up there, most of the people weren't from New England, some of them were, but, people from other places would say, you're from Maine? What do you have, like a pet moose?
Right.
Do you lobster? And actually he has a recreational lobster license. So he'd be like, yeah, I actually do lobster. And he works on a fishing boat sometimes. So there's a lot of stereotypes of Maine that are largely true. And, but yeah, I guess there's just some, there's a little bit of mystery about being in that corner of the country that, even people in our own country know nothing about.
Right. Coming up, Matt pushes back against things that have been said on this show, and he also tells me whether I'd pass his class. Stay with us. This is Seacoast Stories. Hey everyone, it's Troy. I want to give you a quick window into my life, and then we'll get right back to today's story. Last week, my day job at Spotify took a turn for the worse. I can't say much about it for contractual reasons, but I will say that it has left a bad taste in my mouth. You know from this show that I am all about supporting local, and that nothing about me screams suit and tie corporate guy. I've lived that life for 7 years now, and it just doesn't align anymore with who I want to be. For that reason, I'm close to making a big decision, leaving corporate America behind for good and going all in on making real impact on real people right here on the Seacoast. To make that transition, I need your help. And right now, the number one way to support that dream is to hit the follow button wherever you listen to this show. It's on the upper right hand of your screen on Apple and Spotify. If you do that, it will allow me to tell more stories about the area, support local people, and provide the media coverage the Seacoast desperately needs. Thank you so much for doing that and for being here today. I really appreciate it. Now back to today's story. Let's talk about your job as a teacher, Matt. I've spoken to several ex-teachers on this podcast, all of whom have burned out of the industry for reasons like they felt it didn't align with their values anymore, dealing with the parents was too much, teaching has just changed a lot, the kids are different because of technology addiction, short attention spans, not being able to focus. You've been at this for 25 years now. You've dealt with different generations or different iterations of the industry. So you have a perspective here that those guests did not have. So everything that I've just laid out here, what is your response to that?
I hate to paint with a broad brush, and I think that kids are largely the same. Like, people are people, and they want the same things, and they need the same things. I think that their lives have changed so dramatically. You know, when I started teaching, there was a computer in my room, and nobody brought one to school. You know, and I didn't have a laptop as a teacher. And now everybody has an on-demand computer in their pocket constantly, you know, that's calling for their attention. In
school?
Even in school, yeah. And, it calls for their attention, and it takes discipline to not look at that, you know, and to not engage with that. And that's a hard thing for a teenager to develop, is that kind of discipline. But also, kids do amazing things now. Like, they leverage digital tools to make presentations. You know, like, we're not doing trifold posters anymore, you know, because kids can, you know, blow the doors off of that with the tools that they have. And, you know, all the time kids are teaching me things about that. And, you know, I teach media, so I do, you know, video editing and audio editing, and kids still are like, hey, check this out. Look what I did. Yeah. You know, and I'm like, okay, you have to show me how you did that.
Yeah, today's kids are very resourceful.
Yeah.
As someone who works in media, I think it is a beautiful thing that kids now have these opportunities to self-teach or to go onto YouTube and to look at how to do something. I think some of the criticisms of today's youth are warranted, but I also think they are much better set up for success in the short term and long term because of all the things that they can now do for free without having to have teachers or tutors. I think that's amazing.
Yeah. And I think also because there are so many demands on their attention and time. I mean, kids right now are super scheduled with sports and stuff like that, more than I was, than anybody my age was. I think because there's so many demands on their time, you have to let them know why what they're doing is valuable. And if you don't, then you have no chance of reaching them.
Yeah. The phones in school, I'm sure, is a hot topic. At York High School, what are the rules around phones in school?
Well, so the rules around phones right now are that it is up to a teacher's discretion how they'll be used. So in my classroom, I don't really want to see your phone. If I do, I'm going to ask you to put it away. And if it becomes chronic, then we're going to have a talk about that. But I always tell kids, if it's something important, then just let me know what you're doing, and I'm happy to let you do it.
And what qualifies as important?
Like if their parents are reaching out to them, like I always tell, if kids will be like, it's my mom. Can I text her back? And I'll be like, yeah, but you have to tell her you love her. Because as a parent, that kind of thing's really important to me. Or like sometimes kids want to learn more about something you're talking about, and they'll say, hey, I want to look this up. Every now and then I get fact checked by kids, which is funny.
Oh, wow.
And I'm usually right, but occasionally I'm wrong. And I actually kind of like it when they correct me, because then I can make sure that everybody gets the right information, because who knows, what I say may stick in their minds and they'll be wrong about it their whole lives. So yeah. I don't want to be wrong either. So
a parent texting a kid or wanting to reach their kid during the course of the school day. I mean, obviously you didn't grow up in schools like that. I didn't grow up in schools like that. If your parents needed to reach you, they would call the school, and then the school would call your classroom and the message would get to you. I'm just wondering, dealing with parents these days, I've heard a lot of complaints about helicopter parents and parents being too involved and they just need to trust the teachers. Do you feel heat from the parents, and have you noticed a change in their behavior?
I feel like 1% of your interactions can ruin your whole day. And it can become your focus when it's a negative thing. And so by and large, most parents are great, and they're very supportive. And I talk to supportive parents all the time. They're appreciative for what the school does for their kids, and they want their kids to learn, and they understand that like being accountable is part of that. But then there's always been that 1% of parents, but it was always harder for them to reach into the school than it is now. So, and that 1% is loud. And so sometimes I have to just take a moment and reflect upon my whole day, if I have a negative interaction, because, like I've got to spend a day with people that I really enjoy spending time with, talking about something or doing something that I really love doing, and sharing my joy for that with them. And, like having one parent who's not happy with something that I did, or, like that one thing can't be the reason why it was a bad day. But sometimes it's incredibly frustrating. I feel really fortunate to work in a school district where there are a lot of parents who really care about how their kids are doing, and they have, time to devote attention to that. And so by and large, I feel like I'm mostly really well supported.
You teach at York High, mostly English, but you also teach a course about media and podcasting and TV, which is, at least from my education, we didn't have anything like that. And I went to a pretty solid high school in upstate New York. What is it like teaching that class, and what exactly do you teach? What are some of the touch points?
Well, like over the years, I've started electives at York High School, just because the best way to learn something is to learn it through the context that you're excited about. So I've started poetry electives and creative writing electives, and
you can just do that. What's that process like?
There's a process to it, but it's not overly complicated. You just have to be able to say what you're going to do and demonstrate the value that it's going to have, because, it is a resource. You are a resource that is being devoted to something. It has to be valuable. But the last few years I've been teaching some media courses. So I have a broadcast media course, which I actually stole from my own older son's high school experience in Wells. So shout out to Ms. Redmond, who was teaching that course and had a big impact on my son. And I saw what they were doing. I was like, it would be great if our school could have that too. And I think one thing that schools are really bad at is telling their stories. So they're not good at publicity. They're not good at showing people the amazing things that are going on in the school. And so I started that course with an eye to teaching kids how to capture things in a way that's different than we were teaching them, but also to show what's going on in their school and the people in it who are amazing, show that out to the world. So I started out with like an internet media course, where I taught kids how to operate cameras and how to plan projects and to, edit video and assemble things and even publish. And then a few years ago, an auditorium was built at York High School, like a beautiful community auditorium project that the town supported, which was amazing. It's been completely changed the school. And one of the things that was included was a television studio, which I've had no experience with that. Yeah. And because I was teaching this course, they said, you need to develop a course in that. And so I spent a long time with a lot of help from some friends learning about how to operate TV studio equipment. And we've had a course in there a couple of times. It's not going to run this year, but where we produce mostly like an announcement news program a couple times a month, and the kids learn all about TV stuff. My most recent course is podcasting, and it was a unit in my internet media course. And just because I felt like to be an English course, it needed, at least early on, it needed more Englishy stuff, and so podcasting is so focused on the words that I thought that would be great. And I was I love podcasts, and I just love listening to stuff. So I included that as part of the course, but I had students that wanted more of it. And I actually had a student said, it would be great if this was a course. And I said, nobody your age listens to podcasts. This is like 3 or 4 years ago. Matt. I know I was wrong. And she's like, no, we love podcasts. And I said, if you can, let's plan it out together. So me and a couple of 3 students kind of planned out what a course would look like. And I said, I'll go pitch it, but you have to get people to sign up. You need at least 10 people to run this course. And these kids went out, and I think the first year we had 27.
Wow.
So we ran it twice. And it's been an amazing course, it's been fantastic. And yeah, kids actually do love podcasts.
Yeah.
So I was totally wrong about that.
Now, part of your statement is correct. You said listen to podcasts. Yeah. Kids love watching podcasts.
They do. Yes.
Maybe a little wordplay there makes all the difference. You're half wrong.
Well, and right now we're doing audio podcasts because I do want them to focus on recording audio.
Okay.
Because when you're recording video, that is such an attention grabber.
Yeah.
But the reality is if you can hear what the audio is on a video, but you can't see the video, you know exactly what's going on. Mm-hmm. You can be engaged by that. But if you can't hear the audio and all you see is the video, you have no idea what's happening.
Right.
So I like having it as an audio course, but at the same time, we have all the capability of actually recording it too.
Yeah.
So that might be in the future.
Okay. So podcast nerd here. I have to go deeper. Okay. So what in your podcasting course, what are the main bullet points you're hitting? What exactly are you teaching the kids?
Well, I mean, right out of the gate, I teach them how to interview people.
Okay. Am I doing a good job?
I think you're doing a pretty solid job here. Yeah. You would do well in my class.
Okay, perfect.
But just because, and I remember this as a teenager, but I didn't expect it until I actually had kids interview people, is that it's really hard to sit down across from somebody that you don't know very well.
So hard.
And ask them questions sometimes that are meaningful. They're not like, how are you doing? Great weather, isn't it? That kind of thing. So I work on early on training kids on how to do that, and then teaching them how to use microphones effectively in the different contexts in which they do that. And then, we focus on like 3 types of podcasts, like a dialogue podcast, just talking back and forth, an interview podcast, and then a documentary podcast, which is really hard.
So hard. I've worked on them. They're difficult.
Yeah. And usually my kids get, 80% of a documentary podcast, but it's so hard to execute and plan all of it and bring all the pieces together. And then at the end of the course, if we have time, I let them develop whatever podcast they want and show them how to publish it and so that they can kind of start something if they want to keep it going.
Matt, I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation and learning about the Nubble Lighthouse. I know people will be very excited to hear this. We have one final question, and we ask the same final question at the end of the show every week to every person, and I will ask it to you. Matt, what is the mission that you are on right now?
Oh, the mission that you're on. Gosh, I don't know. I've been thinking about this my whole life, and I just kind of keep searching. But I don't know. I think the mission is to do something that you love and share that love with other people. I think that's where I'm at right now. And I do it at school, and I do it in the parks department. And I try to do it through social media, because people are so excited about the lighthouse. So I try to give them as much of what I get from it as I possibly can.
That's Matt Rosenberg, keeper for the Nubble Lighthouse and also an English teacher at York High School. Matt takes some breathtaking photos of the Nubble, and you can find them on Instagram at Nubble Lightkeeper. He also has a photography business called Lightkeeper Media. If you're interested in checking out either of those, I have placed links in the show notes of today's episode. Now, while I had an English teacher at my home studio, I just had to ask Matt one final question. I love reading books, real books, not digital or audio ones. As you may have guessed, I typically read nonfiction, lots of stuff in the philosophy, fitness, and history genres. But my favorite one, actually, is a fiction book called The Alchemist. It's a very popular one, and it's the story of a young shepherd's journey to discover his personal legend. This book is filled with timeless wisdom, and I see so many parallels between the life of Santiago, the main character, and myself. Matt also says The Alchemist is his favorite book, so we took some time to talk about it.
It's an allegory of about what you want to do in life, So
and that's such a good book to teach to seniors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They, in their senior year, they feel like they're just waiting out time and so that they can do the next thing. But I try to help them understand that what you're doing right now is actually the first step of the next thing, and so make the most of it. I love that book. I think that's fantastic.
How do you say the author's name? I've never actually heard it said properly.
I don't even know if I'm saying it properly.
Okay.
So I say Paulo Coelho.
Okay, we'll go with that. Paulo Coelho. I think he wrote that book in his 40s, and it kind of just chilled for 15 years or something, and then started taking off, which is wild.
Yeah, and it was really one of the best-selling books for decades.
Yeah.
So kind of amazing, and he's an amazing author.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever read a book by him that I didn't like. And as an English teacher, it's kind of embarrassing, but I like short books. I have a short attention span. So, all his books are pretty short and pithy,
Yes.
full of meaning and concise. And I love that.
Yes, my attention span is too short to deal with. I just read a 500-page book. It took me 2 months. One, I'm I love to move. I get jittery if I sit too long. So 15 pages is about my max I can bang out in one reading session. So it takes me a while to read.
Yeah. I totally get that, because I do a lot of things. And then when I get home, when my head hits the pillow, my eyes are closed. And
it's same. One more time for Matt Rosenberg, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you did, feel free to leave a review of the show on Apple Podcasts. It'd be great to hear from you. I'm a busy man this week. I'm headed to White Heron on Tuesday, Elephantine on Wednesday, and Throwback Brewery on Thursday. So if you see me at any of these places, even if I'm with someone, please stop me and say hi. I would love to hear your story. Until next week, everybody, live free or die.